Vivek Ramaswamy, talking about his plans, his genius plans on how Trump can cut down on government employees. Just listen to the insanity that comes out from the mouth of this guy.
There on day one, say that anybody in the federal bureaucracy who is not elected representatives obviously are elected by the people, but of the people who are not elected, if your social security number ends in an odd number, you're out. If it ends in an even number, you're in. There's a 50% cut right there. Of those who remain, if your social security number starts in an even number, you're in. And if it starts with an odd number, you're out. Boom. That's a 75% reduction, done literally stochastically. Okay.
So, first of all, there are a number of problems with this approach. It is a stupid approach first to begin with, because it just relies on blind chance. There is no sense or strategy behind it. You're just going to fire people at random. Secondly, people in a bureaucracy are much more qualified because they are picked for their relevant qualifications in whatever they are doing than even elected people. Politicians can bullshit their way into office even when they don't have the relevant skills, knowledge, or whatever. They can bullshit their way, but it is much more difficult to get into a position where you're hired and you go through an interview process when you don't have at least the qualifications to do that job. So first of all, I think the bureaucrats are even much more qualified than politicians. So if there's anyone that needs to get the hell out of there, it's the politicians themselves. Secondly, if the idea is to cut inefficiencies, to cut out people who are redundant or even departments that are redundant, how does this solve anything? How are you sure that you're not going to be firing the best hands with this approach? How are you sure that you're going to be leaving the people that are not even useful in that organization by blindly doing this? What if everyone in a particular department in that organization is fired based on this approach, and there is nobody to do the job in that department because this moron thinks that he can just fire people based on the flip of a coin, the toss of a coin?
One of the virtues of that, it's a thought experiment, not a policy prescription.
Yeah, it's always a thought experiment, not a policy prescription. What's the purpose of having a thought experiment in a government? This is a real government, and you're likely going to be part of this government, just like Trump's concepts of a plan. What is the purpose of having a thought experiment when there is a problem at hand? Why don't you come up with a viable solution? Why don't you come up with a viable alternative? Why don't you come up with a viable proposal, something that's actually workable, that can, if your goal is to reduce government bureaucracy, as you have said, why are you using a thought experiment at this point in time? So it means that you have no idea how to even do this. You're not interested in doing this. You're just interested in the rhetoric of trying to sound smart. It's a thought experiment at this point in time. You had all the campaign to run your thought experiments and you couldn't come up with something solid. You had all the time to do all this. I'm sure you ran for president, and the best you could come up with, after being considered for a position in government efficiency, the best you could come up with is a thought experiment. That's just sad.
But one of the virtues of that thought experiment is that you don't have a bunch of lawsuits you're dealing with about gender discrimination or racial discrimination or political viewpoint discrimination. Actually, the reality is
what you have is you totally destroy whatever those people were doing, or you cause a lot of chaos or panic in the country, in the system. That's what you do. So are these people are they anarchists? Do they actually want to just destroy the right wingers usually complain that leftists hate the US, that they want to destroy the US. But from their actions, it seems like it's the right wingers who want to destroy the US with all these things that they're doing, with all the protectionism, with all the tariffs and trade war that Trump is going to start with China and so many other things. Those are the things that look destructive to the US, that looks to undermine US power globally.
Mass. You didn't bring the chisel, you brought a chainsaw. I guarantee you, do that on day one, and do step 2 on day 2. On day 3, not a thing will have changed for the ordinary American other than the size of their government being a lot smaller and more restrained.
This guy really believes his own bullshit. So let's use a very practical example of someone who's done something like this and see how well it went. Elon Musk took over Twitter, bought Twitter, and then fired more than 50% of the staff. And he's been held today that, oh, Twitter is still functioning. Twitter is still functioning, even though Elon Musk fired this much people. Wrong. Twitter is dead. And what has replaced it, X, is such a shit social media site. Elon Musk took one of the premier social media sites in the world and turned it to shit. All you see there is Elon Musk himself, troll bots, and sex bots. The quality of discourse is just filled with right-wing nonsense, with neo-Nazis declaring their comeback and right-wingers, moaning and complaining about being oppressed. There is no quality discourse on Twitter anymore, or on X anymore. The platform is dead. And what more indication of it being dead can you see than the valuation of the company itself, which has tanked to about 1/5 of its value? X is now valued at a measly $9.4 billion compared to the $44 billion that Elon Musk bought it at. So yeah, he's very, very efficient in making companies lose money. Same thing with this guy who started the company and conned people into investing into the company, cashing out, and then when the company crashed, they were left with their pants down. People lost money, but he got rich off it, while the company did not even produce any profit. So these are the people that want to run an efficient government. Yeah, you could always do something with less people, but the work you might be producing might be of inferior output. You could always do anything with less people. Yeah, you could always do it with less people. But what's the quality of their output compared to when you had more people? Less doesn't always mean more efficient.
Spending a lot less money to operate it. And most people who've run a company, especially larger companies, know this. It's 25% of the people who do 80 to 90% of the useful work. These government agencies are no different.
So you keep hearing this, it's even the 80-20 rule. 20% of the people do 80% of the job, or 20% of the clients being 80% of the business, and so on and so forth. Everyone within an organization have their own role. Their roles are not equal, but they have their own parts to play. The CEO of an organization has a role that is much different from middle management. Middle management has a role that's much different from, say, the cleaner in the organization. They don't obviously contribute the same output, the same quality. So, but supposing you have weighed and saw that the cleaners in the organization only provide about 0.0000 whatever percent of the value of the company, and you say, so you know what, we're going to do away with 20% that's not as productive, including the cleaners. We're going to do away with them. Only those guys who are pulling the big weights, the managers themselves, the MDs and all that, those are the people that are going to leave. Who's going to clean the company? Who is going to do those little things that you might think are insignificant, but when you put them together, they make the system work? Who's going to do all that? And you think the managers themselves are going to take the mops and the brooms and begin to clean the companies? What do you think is going to happen to that company by simply just firing the cleaners? Let's say these are the lowest rung in the company hierarchy. Simply firing them. What do you think is going to happen in that organization?
Different. So now imagine you could do that same thought experiment, but not just doing it at random, but do it still at large scale while having some metric of screening for those who actually had both the greatest competence as well as the greatest commitment and knowledge of the Constitution.
So how exactly are you going to do that? How are you going to screen for competence and knowledge when you are firing people at random? When you are applying a coin toss, the flip of a coin? How does that even work? This guy loves his own bullshit.
That, I think, would immediately raised not only the civic character of the United States.
How?
Now we feel okay.
How?
The people we elect to run the government, they've got the power back. They're running the government again, as opposed to the unelected bureaucrats who wield the power today. It would also stimulate the economy. I mean, the regulatory state is like a wet blanket on the American economy. Most of it's unconstitutional. All we require is leadership with a spine to get in there and actually do what conservative presidents have maybe gestured towards and talked about, but have not really effectuated ever in modern history.
It's like these people, like they're anarchists. It's like they actually don't want any except when they want the government to do things that they like. There is a reason why governments and regulations exist, because capitalism itself is a very chaotic system. It's a very chaotic economic system that would exploit if left unchecked, because the goal of companies, the goal of a capitalist is profit, is money making, and they will try to make as much money as possible. They try to make as much money as possible as they can get away with, even when things are going wrong. So you need the government, you need these regulations to rein it in, because you are living in a society where there are competing interests. Then you need to have a third party, a neutral party, that would be able to adjudicate these interests, to reconcile the differences in these interests. If not, it will be like feudalism. It will be like feudal lords. These corporations will be like feudal lords, trying to carve out as much territory as they can by force or by whatever they can get away with. So you think that there should be no regulations? There should be as minimal regulations as possible. Companies should just be allowed to do whatever the hell they like. That's crazy. And to think that someone who is supposedly smart would think that this is a good thing is just terrible.